Try not to splash your tragic backstory with the water glasses, Lila. This is a 5-star floor, not a sympathy car wash. Serena murmured as she breezed past the host's stand, her smile lacquered for the chandeliers, and her shoulder clipping Lila Carter, just enough to say who owned the aisle. Lila didn't take the bait, not because it didn't sting, but because the night clock had started and she had 10 tables, 3 birthdays, and a manager who measured worth in bottle sales. She righted her tray and scanned the door as a man in a modest gray suit stepped in like a secret, trying not to make noise. The hostess hesitated, eyes skimming his jacket as if it owed her a logo, then led him to a corner table that allowed the room to pretend he wasn't there. The influencers at 21 caught the moment the way gulls catch wind. The woman leaned toward her boyfriend and let a giggle skim the stem of her glass, while she murmured that this place wasn't for budget diners, and the guy adjusted their ring light, adding that he was probably here for the breadbasket. At the bar, Marcus Wren, a city-famous tycoon with a reputation for charity and a talent for leverage, watched the gray suit sit and said to the bartender with a smirk that the man would be ordering the cheapest wine, and the bartender laughed softly, because laughter is cheaper than rent. Mr. Cole, the manager, traced the corner table in the mirrored wall and filed the guest under not our kind, his mouth tightening in a way he thought looked like standards. Lila slid from the service alley into the dining room and kept the pace that got meals hot and complaints cold. She clocked the new guest's shoes, clean but not loud, and the way he held his shoulders like someone used to choosing the exit seat. He looked toward the menu but didn't squint at the prices, didn't fidget, didn't posture to prove he belonged. Lila set down a crisp menu and asked in a steady, unbright voice if he wanted to start with a cocktail. He lifted his eyes, and she registered the interesting blend of alertness and patience. Water, he said, tone neutral, flat, no ice. He let the leather wine list close without opening it, and added that he'd take the ribeye medium rare and to surprise him on the sides. The surprise me sat there like a quiet dare. Lila noted the order and the absence of theatrics. She offered a brief nod and moved to the POS, where Serena was already typing in a table of celebratory champagne like she was conducting an orchestra. Serena whispered that Lila should push the Bordeaux on the breadbasket guy, and that Cole was watching numbers tonight, then flitted away to flirt a check average into compliance. Manny, runner, expediter, and the kind of co-worker who could build you a raft out of broken ramekins, brushed past with a soft nudge and asked if she was good. Ask me at 11, she said under her breath, and Manny's eyes sharpened for a second before he vanished into the kitchen glare. The ticket hit the rail, and Anthony at the grill made his standard face at medium rare, the one that said rare had a church, and he was the priest. You sure? He asked, already laying down the steak. Lila shot back that if he cooked it his way they'd need a veterinarian, and the line snorted while oil sizzled like gossip. She prepped charred asparagus and a smashed Yukon with a crisp edge and passed an ear for the dining room. Hearing the influencers narrate their own charm, while Wren tuned the bar with a laugh that made people tip out of fear they'd be seen not tipping. Mr. Cole drifted past and told Lila to sell wine to the corner table because water wasn't in the spirit of the place. Lila said the guest had ordered flat, and Cole said that's why they invented upsell. She didn't answer, because arguments with managers are like specials. There'll be a new one tomorrow. When the steak landed, Lila lifted the plate and felt the heat through the pad of her palm, the way she liked to feel it, like proof you were carrying something that mattered. She walked the room the way a careful driver takes a curve, steady, eyes up, and set the plate down with the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. Anything else I can bring to start? She asked, and the man, Ethan Cross, though no one in the room said his name yet, shook his head, appreciation flickering in his gaze, not for her, but by way of her, for the kitchen, for the rhythm. As she placed the knife at a slight angle, the way they trained it for visual balance, she slid a small folded paper under the handle, a motion so practiced it looked like tidying. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She stepped away and felt the air shift a breath later when his hand ghosted under the steel and palmed the note. He took one measured bite of steak, nodded as if to file it under correct, then unfolded the paper under the tablecloth with his left hand. The words were blunt, not elegant, because this wasn't a night for elegance. Don't react. They're watching you. Leave before the deal starts at 11. His hand paused over the knife like a metronome that missed a beat. He didn't look at the bar. He didn't look at the influencers. He did the slow scan of a man who knew that seeing was different from staring. Two businessmen in tailored suits reached for their phones in the same moment with the same hand, like choreography. A senator's aide hovered near the private lounge with the stiff patience of a person who has practiced waiting. An unfamiliar trio, too alert and too bland, slipped through the frosted glass doors where dessert went to masquerade as philanthropy. Ethan set the knife down and dabbed his mouth with the napkin as if blotting out second thoughts, then stood with the quiet dignity of a patron taking a call. Lila counted 4 and followed, tray against her ribs like a shield. The hallway to the restrooms held old photographs of the steakhouse when it had been a family place with more chairs per square foot and a chalkboard menu. Ethan stopped beneath a picture of a fisherman shaking hands with a cook. He didn't ask who she was. He asked why he should trust her, words low and even, and Lila answered without drama that if he stayed, he wouldn't walk out, because they already suspected him. He said people order water, and she said not here, not alone, not in a suit that didn't advertise itself. His lips twitched, not into a smile, but into an acknowledgement that she saw what there was to see. She told him, in sentences that had been rehearsed only in her head, that the restaurant was a front on certain nights, that a charity auction tonight was a disguise for transfers arranged in the language of grants and nighttime deliveries, that a senator and a billionaire would sign off on moving weapons under the names of middle schools and churches, that she had audio and video and a locker with a false bottom and a lipstick-shaped drive she trusted like a friend. He said he had contacts who would move on a signal, but that he hadn't planned to use the signal on ribeye night. She said plans were what rich people made and poor people survived, and tonight's survival required both of them. He asked what she needed, and Lila didn't blink when she told him to go back to his table, refused the wine pitch with enough edge to draw eyes, and then at 11 stand, and ask one clear question loud enough to splinter the room. She would take the AV in the ballroom and feed it what she had. Manny would slow Mr. Cole. The bartender would pretend not to be involved the way he pretended not to know which men left without paying for their smiles. Ethan considered, then nodded like he had already decided before he asked. And you? He asked, and Lila said she'd rather walk out than be carried. They returned to the floor, and the day kept pretending to be normal. Serena approached the corner with a second-tier cab like she was delivering absolution and spoke gently about how a Bordeaux pairing would elevate the experience for guests who cared about taste. Ethan declined without flourish, and Serena's smile broke for a second before repairing itself for the influencers, who murmured that some people couldn't handle the good stuff. Mr. Cole watched Lila from across the room like he was counting her breaths and how few of them should belong to him. The private lounge doors opened in a smooth, perfectly timed swing, and the main lights dimmed the way rooms do when money is about to give itself a standing ovation. Ren drifted toward the small stage with a microphone and the confidence of a man who had never been told to wait his turn. The senator arrived late enough to look important, his smile polished, and aimed like a flashlight with a narrow beam. Lila moved along the room's perimeter until the AV alcove hugged her shoulders. The equipment rack hummed gently, neglected since the reopening 2 years earlier when the tech had celebrated too much and napped under the dais. The spare HDMI port waited behind a dusted panel like a spare key under an obvious rock. She slid the lipstick drive into the cord and watched a monitor blink awake. Manny stepped into Mr. Cole's path with a tray of espresso and a fresh tiramisu and invented a stumble that cost 20 seconds and a dry cleaning bill. Mr. Cole hissed Lila's name like an accusation that would work better if he had less creme on his tie. She ignored him and tested the feed, killing the preview before the screen behind Ren could catch a stray frame of truth. The room gathered itself for performance. The wealthy elite, donors, developers, spouses whose jewelry did the talking, circled the central table while servers adjusted champagne flutes to perfect triangles. Ren smiled with teeth and spoke about community as if it were a stock to buy low. He pitched a paddle raise for a children's program that would receive a rounded, manageable check, while a different program got box after box of something no child should ever see. The senator shook hands like a man blessing crops. Serena and Jade preened in the ring-light glow of 21, selling the idea that they were selling something else. The random couple at 12, the woman whose hands looked like chalk dust and the man whose shoulders wore overtime, watched with the cautious attention of people who have wanted to believe and learned not to too often. At 11 on the dot, Ethan stood. He didn't tap a glass or announce himself. He simply said, "Question," and the word traveled the length of the room and settled into a silence that had been waiting for it. Ren turned smoothly and invited him to speak, voice loaded with genial control. Ethan, in the same neutral tone he had used to order water, asked if he should tell everyone what they were really auctioning tonight. Gasps rippled the way shock does when it has good seats. Ren's smile made an effort to keep up with the room and failed by a beat. Lila pressed play. The screens behind Ren flickered from a looping slideshow of kids holding books to a dark corridor where voices spoke with the calm of confidence. The first clip played like a budget meeting for a church drive, full of code and care, until the senator's voice, recognizable if you ever watched a hearing with breakfast, said they didn't call them weapons, they called them solutions. Ren's voice, lower, asked about schedules and packaging, and someone off-camera answered with names of nonprofits that sounded like after-school programs. Lila cued a second file, a grainy shot of a loading dock where a man in kitchen whites signed a delivery receipt while boxes slipped into the shadows. Item lines wobbled into focus, calibers, quantities, dates. The influencers forgot themselves and pointed their phones at the screens as if they'd arranged the reveal. Mr. Cole lunged for the AV rack as if he could rip the night back to normal, and Manny intercepted with a fresh spill game that made Cole hop like the floor was learning to bite. Security peeled from the edges, 3 men who had been furniture and were suddenly moving walls. Lila took a step forward and, when the first guard reached for her arm, pivoted and planted a well-aimed kick to his shin that made him curse under his breath and reconsider whether this was the job he wanted to keep. The bartender stopped polishing the same glass and stared. The quiet couple at 12 leaned closer to each other like 2 pieces of a bridge. Serena said "deep fake" out loud because it had become a word you could use when you didn't want to use the ones that meant you were complicit, and Jade filmed Serena saying it because content doesn't take sides. Ethan didn't grandstand. He filled the silence with the dry outline of what the room was seeing. He said the police were already staged outside on what had come in as a noise complaint and would become something else now. The first siren bled into the background, then another, then a short burst of radio chatter that announced the arrival of a fact. Ren called for calm in a tone that had made developers hand him land. The senator puffed up and chunked out a few phrases about outrageous accusations and malicious editing. The detective who entered first had the unadorned look of a person who knew exactly what she was looking for. She followed Ethan's glance to Lila and then to the AV and made a crisp signal to the officers behind her. One of Ren's security tried the kitchen exit and discovered a cop at the door with the kind of shoulders people behave for. In those 60 seconds where outcomes get decided, the night revealed itself. Ren's charm stripped to bone. The senator's vocabulary thinned. The influencers started whisper arguing about whether to go live or wait for a better caption, deciding in the end to film silently so they could narrate their heroism later. Mr. Cole speed-walked toward Lila with a manager's idea of authority and pronounced loudly that she was disgruntled and unstable, and Manny laughed once, clean and bright, then told the detective that Lila had kept the floor safe and the staff sane for months while the management sold integrity in small pieces. Serena drifted to Lila and tried on a supportive tone that looked good under the dining room lights. Lila said nothing because sometimes the quiet line is the blade. Cuffs came out without theater. One officer read Ren his rights in a voice that didn't care how many charities his name adorned. Another took the senator's aide aside and removed a phone whose screen contained more than photos of grandchildren. The detective asked Lila where the originals were stored, and Lila gave the locker number and the false bottom trick and the dessert file name she had chosen because no one ordered it anymore. The detective nodded, liking the clean redundancy of a person who doubled her backups. Ethan stood off to the side, hands loose, face composed, the gray suit suddenly fitting him like it had always known what it was hiding. When the detective finished delegating the evidence grab, she nodded to him with a small acknowledgement that said she knew who he was and that he had played this the right way. As the room exhaled, the restless ones tried to leave. The quiet couple at 12 paid in cash, pressed a folded bill into Lila's palm with a quick whisper that they believed her before the screens lit up, and slipped into the night without asking for validation. The influencers, hearts pounding with the sugar of impending views, took a few careful shots of the red-blue wash on the glass before their better survival instincts told them to film through the window instead. Mr. Cole hovered between fury and calculation, ending up at a kind of performative concern that looked worse than anger. He told the detective Lila had undermined morale and drawn the wrong kind of attention, and the detective replied that attention was exactly what saved lives tonight. Ethan walked to Lila like he had all the time in the world, which is how people who have money collapse tension when they want to reassure you. He thanked her plainly. He told her that when everyone else filmed or laughed, she passed a note to a stranger because the truth mattered more than her job. He said he wanted her on his side. He didn't pitch a salary or a title. He offered something heavier than either, a place where what she noticed would be the point, not the problem. Lila didn't rush. She had learned that rushed decisions smell like fear. She asked what the work looked like, and he described rooms like this in other cities, deals that dressed as charity, audits that started with a tray and ended with court filings. He admitted he played a terrible version of an arrogant diner sometimes to see who would choose decency over tips. He said he was testing tonight too, but her note changed the test. He said her call was the reason sirens arrived on time. Outside, the night rearranged. Red-blue lights painted honesty on chrome. Officers moved witnesses through statements. A box truck with big letters parked at the curb to take away things that shouldn't have been here. Lila looked back at the dining room, at the chandeliers admitting their glow wasn't magic, at Serena's hair losing a little fight with gravity, at Mr. Cole arguing with a clipboard. Manny sidled up with a dish towel draped dramatically over his shoulder and bumped her shoulder with his fist, asking if she could still use a ride home or if she was leaving in a helicopter now. She told him not to be an idiot, and he grinned and said he'd always suspected that the world would have to widen a doorway for her someday. The night brought cleanup like it always does. The kitchen cooled to a normal hum. Anthony wiped down the grill with reverence, muttering that the steak had been perfect no matter what the rest of the evening did to the menu. The bartender counted glassware with the accuracy of someone who prepares for audits and absolutions. The influencer couple argued about whether to show their faces in the final edit, then decided their brand could survive being in the room as long as the captions were humble. Serena disappeared for a while and re-emerged with her lipstick reset and an apology half-formed. She told Lila she always knew she was meant for more than the floor, and Lila let it sit because she'd spent too long trying to explain herself to people who preferred her small. Ethan approached, hands in his pockets now, jacket open. He asked for her number, not as a man, but as a recruiter of conscience, and gave her his card without a logo, just a name and a number that would pick up at any hour. He said there was a team that chased nights like this and tried to turn them into mornings that didn't repeat. He said he could use someone who saw the angles and didn't need the applause. She asked whether he would ever walk into a place like this again and order water to test people, and he smiled just enough to be human and said he probably would, because habits are hard to break, but he would do it with better timing and a better partner. She told him she wasn't anyone's partner yet. He said he knew, that he'd wait, that good hires take the time they take. A patrol officer drifted over to take Lila's formal statement, and Ethan stepped back without making it noble, simply giving her room to be the center of her own moment. She recounted what she had seen and recorded and saved, no embellishment. The officer's pen kept up, the detective's nods matched the beats. When it was done, the detective thanked her with a handshake that meant something, then turned to Ethan and said they'd be in touch about the files. Wren passed in cuffs with a look that indicted the world for failing to respect him. The senator wrote out his exit by asking for a lawyer he had on speed dial. His aide muttered that he already had. The night softened after that. The last limo doors closed. The influencers went live on the sidewalk and tried on sincerity. The quiet couple's bus hissed to a stop 2 blocks down. Lila stepped away from the neon and the sirens and felt the strange weight of calm, like she had been running with a bag of stones and had finally put it down. Manny asked if she was coming back tomorrow or quitting in a blaze of Instagram fireworks. She said she'd be back to close out her section because no one else would wipe the sugar caddies correctly and because the rent didn't pause for heroics. Manny laughed and promised to cover her first 2 tables while she talked to that fancy card. He added, with the delicate sarcasm of a friend who earned the right, that if she got rich, she'd better tip more than the dollar Wren used to leave when he thought they weren't looking. Ethan walked beside her to the curb, where the night held the cool of late hours and the city hummed with its regular aches. He apologized, in a light way that didn't ask to be absolved, for playing the curt stranger earlier. She said she'd seen worse, and that sometimes the test shows you more than you meant to learn. He told her he'd send the signal sooner next time. She told him not to admire his timing when he could fix it. He laughed softly at that, and said he liked how she gave advice like a bill, clear and due now. They stood for a moment watching the steakhouse's reflection in the window of a squad car, the building looking smaller without its crowd. Lila thought about how many nights she'd spent here, half resenting it, half grateful for the paycheck, counting tips and insults like they were equal currency. She thought about the note under the knife and how her hand hadn't shaken because people like her can be brave when the world isn't watching if the stakes are human. She thought about the old photos in the hallway and the fisherman shaking hands with the cook. She thought, with a small surge of stubborn joy, that tonight she had shaken hands with the future. Ethan said he'd call tomorrow, not as a promise but as a plan, and she believed him, not because of the suit or the card or the way the detective used his name, but because of how he had stood when he could have sat. She told him to use his inside voice when he called. He smiled and said he would. Manny's beat-up sedan rolled to the curb, windows down, a playlist whispering something from the dashboard. He leaned over the passenger seat and shouted that the meter was running, and Lila rolled her eyes in the way that said nothing was wrong with the world that couldn't be improved by a drive with a friend who knew your coffee order. She shook Ethan's hand then, firm, short, the way grown-ups say see you later, and slid into Manny's car. As they pulled away, she looked back through the open window and saw Ethan standing on the curb, hands in his pockets, watching her go, not like a man watching a character exit his story, but like a man observing a person stepping into her own. The red-blue washed across his jacket and his face, and then faded as the cars idled, lights dimmed, and the city returned to its unspectacular, beautiful work of carrying people home. Manny asked if she was okay. She said yes, and then surprised herself by meaning it without qualifications. He asked what she would do with tomorrow if it called. She said she might try something new. By the time they hit the first light, the adrenaline had shifted into something cooler. The phone in her pocket buzzed once, a message from a number with no name yet, 2 words that didn't try too hard. Thank you. She didn't reply immediately. She watched the crosswalk tick down. She listened to Manny's humming. She let the quiet be the applause, and it was enough. When she finally typed back, she didn't write a speech or a plan. She sent 3 words that fit the night. See you tomorrow. And that was how it ended. Not with speeches or spotlights, but with recognition measured in the simple way eyes met and didn't look away. The steakhouse behind her would open again, and menus would be read, and wine would be sold, and laughter would echo against wood and glass. But something had shifted on the floor where less visible work gets done. A man who tested people had been tested back. A manager who measured worth in bottles learned that some nights the tab comes due in a different register. And a waitress who kept her head down raised it just enough to change the room and then the night outside it. No moral carved into marble, no lecture spooled. Just the clean click of things falling into place. The note under the knife, the screens lighting up, the hand extended on the sidewalk, and the new shape of a life fitting like it had been waiting for her to step into it.